Entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, venturing my tippy toes into the waters of college basketball today because, frankly, I've watched a little bit of college basketball so far this season. You know, the time that goes over before golf starts on CBS, so I see like the last 30 seconds of some of these games. So I have really no opinion. So this is going to be college basketball for dummies like myself, helping me go through and wade through the waters. Someone who actually covers this full time from Yahoo Sports, who's releasing like 30,000 short videos on every team this week. You might know him for fantasy football as well. It's Brad Evans. What's going on, man?
Oh, man, I think that's a low estimate, the 30,000. You might want to tack on a couple of zeros there. But, hey, look, I'm glad that you have immersed yourself in some form or fashion in the college basketball space because, let's be honest, the last 30 seconds that you're watching before you absorb golf, that's the money-making time. So hopefully we're going to try to get you card cash in your pocket as well and when you have a bracket tournament or three.
All right, so I'm going to try to get people in the game as well here. So there's two ways to win 20 DK dollars if you want to get into a draw. Number one is like this episode, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section and give me your favorite long shot to win the NCAA tournament this year. So we'll say 25 to 1 and beyond. Anyone from that. You can't just pick Duke. You can pick whoever from beyond 25 to 1. Or if you leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, no matter where the audio is, 5 stars, something nice, DK handle, boom, you're in the draw for 20 DK dollars. Winners will be announced on Monday's golf show with myself and Jeff Feinberg. Brad, is Duke the team to beat? Like, it's the only team I've heard about all year.
Well, look, yeah, and of course the Zion Williamson shoe explosion incident that was wearing the PG 2.5s, and Paul George coming out and saying, yeah, we got to do like some intrepid investigative journalism into this to figure out why his sole separated from the rest of the shoe, caused him to have a knee injury, missed the last couple of games. Duke got by in a tough matchup against Syracuse, and for the largest audience ever to see a regular season college basketball game, 35,000 screaming fans in a football stadium in which they have a basketball game at the Carrier Dome in Western New York. But they got beat by Virginia Tech on the road in Blacksburg as the follow-up. They need a healthy Zion Williamson. This is a team that has some weaknesses. Even with Zion on the court, they're one of the most rancid three-point shooting teams in the country, netting just over 30% from downtown on the year. Look, they got Zion, they got RJ Barrett, they got Cam Reddish. All these guys going to go inside the top 5 of the NBA draft, but they're not particularly deep. They are balanced with Williamson on the floor. But again, they have their susceptibilities. I don't think they're the best team in college basketball right now. I will not be picking Duke to cut down the nets. That's too chalky for me. It's a single elimination format. They call it March Madness for a reason because it's wild, it's wacky, and it's unpredictable. And I am predicting that Duke will not be hoisting the hardware in the end.
See, this is why I need to jump in on this, because I definitely have to fill out my bracket and do a show with how terrible my picks are. And people are like, you don't know anything. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm basically the audience of who people are going to be competing against during brackets when I'm like, oh, maybe Old Dominion can get in. And since they're the Mighty Monarchs, I'll pick them because it's a fun name. And I do enjoy their jerseys. And they did once beat Notre Dame in the first round of the tournament when Notre Dame should have taken a 3. Instead, they decided to lay it up and lose by 1 with time coming out. So they forever have a place in my heart for beating Notre Dame in the round of 64. But if it's not going to be Duke, and you say that the three-point shooting isn't there, how are they free throw-wise?
They're a decent team at the charity stripe, except Zion Williamson. Actually, Zion Williamson, that is a liability for him. As a club, they're netting close to 70%. On the freebies, RJ Barrett, probably their more esteemed or the most esteemed free throw shooter on this roster. But yeah, in those nip and tuck matchups, particularly later on in the dance, and I'm not saying that Duke's going to get bounced in the opening round. They're not going to pull a Virginia and lose to the mighty Retrievers of Maryland, Baltimore County. They're definitely going to be a second weekend team, but as they get deeper and deeper and the competition gets stiffer and stiffer in some of these later rounds, the tournament, maybe the Elite Eight, the Final Four, depending upon the matchup, this is a team that can certainly stub its toe and find itself back in Durham with its head hanging low. So they got to start nailing threes. When they do nail threes, they're unstoppable. They're almost impossible to beat. But those, situations have been few and far between. They're fantastic in transition. They're an excellent defensive club. But again, you got to have a healthy Zion, and those long balls have got to drain. Otherwise, again, I don't see Duke winning the whole enchilada in the end.
Okay, so if it's not going to be Duke, you're not going to take the chalk. They're number 3 as we speak right now in the AP polling. So you got like Gonzaga, Kentucky, Virginia. Is it going to be one of those 3?
Yeah, I think North Carolina's in that conversation as well right now. I love the Zags. And we always hear the tired narratives and cliches that are out there. Well, if Gonzaga played in the ACC or the Big Ten, they'd be a middling team. Who have they really played since December? Look, I get that, but are we also forgetting too, and a lot of people just tend to have amnesia about this, but 2 years ago, they were in the national title game and were nip and tuck with North Carolina. If the referees, the Zebras, don't hijack that contest and call a foul on Zach Collins, it'll be an NBA lottery pick. With 5 minutes ago, Collins fouled out. He was in foul trouble for much of the game. I think the core of that game would have taken on a different tone, and maybe the Zags would have won their first national title in school history. I think this year's team, this year's Bulldogs version, is the best team that Mark Few has ever had. And that's quite a statement to make, because Gonzaga has had a multitude of NBA players that have come in and out of that program over the years, and a lot of teams that have performed at a high level. But you got a guy in Rui Hachimura who's going to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. He could beat you off the dribble, a supreme defender, a guy that can go out there and drop 20, 25 in a game and beat you in variable ways. I think the unsung hero on this roster is a kid named Brandon Clark, who was a walking, talking, double-doubles machine, and is probably I think he's the key cog. He's the most efficient player they have. I think he's a 10-year NBA player. He is a dynamite defender, shot blocker extraordinaire. He just does a lot of the dirty work underneath, while Hachimura, Josh Perkins at guard, Kispert outside, some of these other players bask in the glory of what Clark sets up for them. But this team's got depth. They get Killian Tilly back for the postseason, which is trending in the right direction right now. They've got Gino Crandall, who, remember, Tilly and Crandall both did not play in the Maui Invitational, which they knocked off Duke in the title game back during Feast Week, Thanksgiving week here in the States. So they have all the ingredients. They've been destroying fools in the WCC. It's not even been remotely close. And I think pound for pound, they are the most efficient and best overall team in the country.
If we look at the overall odds right now for who's actually going to win the national championship, Duke is the prohibitive favorite. They're plus 250. The Zags are second. They're plus 750. Virginia's plus 950. Kentucky 11-1. Michigan, North Carolina 13-1. You don't see a lot of 13-1s on the board, but we got 2 of them with UNC and the Wolverines. Tennessee's 14. Michigan State's 14. And then it's a big, big drop off. The next closest team to that group is Nevada at 28-1. Are those the teams that we should actually think have a legitimate chance of winning, or should there be another team in that group?
There are some other teams out there, I think, that are definitely in that conversation. Nevada's really interesting to me because of the experience they have. They play positionless basketball. The Martin twins at 6'7". They can beat you off the dribble. They defend extraordinarily well. Jordan Caroline, who was Simeon Rice's kid, of course, the great Simeon Rice, defensive end formerly of my University of Illinois Fighting Illini, and of course playing the NFL with a number of teams, probably most memorably with the Denver Broncos, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in which he won a Super Bowl with, and that Gruden year, and Brad Johnson, the quarterback, and with the Arizona Cardinals. That guy's a stud. He's got the highest motor of any player in college basketball that I've seen this season. Can beat you, outside. Relentless on the glass, really attacks the 10 aggressively. That Nevada team is fascinating. And for me as a bracketologist, probably the hardest team to seed right now because they do not have a single quadrant 1 victory. And they play in a down Mountain West conference. Now they have a pivotal matchup upcoming this weekend against Utah State, which, really could determine their fate in the Mountain West tournament. It could land them as low as maybe a 6 or 7 seed if they were to stumble early in the Mountain West tournament. But that's a team that you don't want to see in your region because of the athletes and execution that they have. Another team that I really like is LSU. and I was going to pull up the odds. I don't have it in front of me.
80 to 1 for LSU right now.
Are you kidding me? 80 to 1 on LSU. And that's an extraordinary value to me, because if you look at the ingredients of teams that are usually successful in the NCAA tournament, it usually starts with guard play. And they have two outstanding guards in Tremont Waters and Skylar Mays. And then their front court is sick. Naz Reid, one of the more ballyhooed freshmen in college basketball, to go along with Cavell, Big B Williams, Emmett Williams as well. They're number 2 in the country in offensive rebounding percentage. They generate a second chance close to 37% of its possessions. To go along with that guard play, to go along with improved defense, to go along with the fact that they've cleaned up some of the mistakes that they made earlier in the season and are playing more streamlined basketball. Watch out for LSU. Yeah, Kentucky and Tennessee, they're getting all the accolades in the SEC, but I would not be shocked to see the Tigers in the Mecca of college basketball in Minneapolis in the Final Four within shouting distance of maybe winning the entire thing. And again, at 80 to 1, that's worth an Andy Jackson or two.
So you have Kentucky and Tennessee. You just brought them up in the SEC. They're both 11 and 14 to 1 to take home the overall national championship. What is it? I mean, Kentucky, they're just going to be there every single year because they have the best recruiting class and athletes, I assume. Not that I've seen a second of them. That's just, I'm going off history with this one. Where the hell did Tennessee come from?
Well, Tennessee is a veteran-savvy club, and Rick Barnes is a guy that's, been around college basketball for decades, had a lot of success previously at the University of Texas. This is a team last year that lost to Loyola Chicago, and of course the story of Sister Jean and everything. We all remember that. They were victimized by Cinderella, but this is a team with Grant Williams, who is a legitimate pro, a guy that is a beast in the interior. Earlier this season against Vanderbilt, and this is just a kind of a case in point. I don't know if you remember Allen Houston, Mayo. Back in the 90s he played at Tennessee, and he was in the NBA for a number of years, I think with the Knicks, if I remember correctly. He might have been drafted by the Knicks. Well, Grant Williams was the latest player in Tennessee school history to score 40 points in a game. He did it against Vandy, and in that game, he was 23 of 23 at the free throw line. That's insane. So you go along with his game, his brutalizing style, and Admiral Schofield, one of the greatest names in college basketball, who could beat you inside and out. Jordan Bone runs the point. It's really ascended. But the key in terms of overall long-term success in the tournament and having a long lifespan is Kyle Alexander. He needs to be a rim protector, because Tennessee, as efficient as they are on offense, they've often played very loose on defense. We're starting to see some of those true colors rise, to the surface here down the stretch. But they're a good team, but I think they're one of those high seeds that I wouldn't be shocked loses, by the end of the first weekend.
Well, I always like any team that if they can get to the charity stripe, that they actually make them when it comes tournament time, especially when they're coming.
Especially college.
Well, it's funny. Like you mentioned Duke, how they're like not a great 3-point shooting team, but if you get Barrett to the line, he can make his. Zion's not going to do that. But I feel like if you can consistently play inside during the tournament, you don't leave yourself open to these giant wild swings where you're going to get upset by marginal teams that, unless they get super hot from 3, that they're not going to beat you. That I don't think I would want to rely on like an outside shooting team or a team that plays no defense and has to score X amount of points if they have any chance of winning. Those teams always tend to scare me.
Yeah, and what I always look for, and look, there are a lot of analytical sites that are out there, and if you're not familiar with this one site in particular, you need to be. I think it's a fundamental part of everybody's research regimen when it comes to filling.
Is it yahoo.com?
No, it's kenpom.com, actually. Good guess. We'll do some of the dirty work for you. But if you are a numbers nerd like myself and Mayo, I know you would certainly describe yourself as such. It is a treasure trove of information. It breaks every single team down in terms of strengths and weaknesses at a very granular level. So for those people that may not be familiar, like Dean Oliver, he wrote this book, about the 4 factors, and it was tied to the NBA. It's that same methodology that is applied to college basketball, and the numbers and the deep dive it does in scouting these teams. And I always look for teams that are inside the top 20 or 25 in terms of adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. And right now, there are only a handful of squads that qualify in both of those categories. Virginia's one, The aforementioned Gonzaga Bulldogs are another. Duke is there. North Carolina is there. Kentucky right now is in that conversation. And really, that's about it. So, those to me are the teams that are in a class by themselves in terms of odds of winning the national title, and the rest are catching up. But as we've seen previously, like with the Kemba Walker team from a few years ago in UConn, you catch fire at the right time. You can run roughshod through the big dance and win 6 consecutive games.
Well, I don't have any odds on conference tournaments as of yet, but even just to talk about the SEC for a second, you mentioned like LSU is 80-1 to win the national championship, with both Tennessee and Kentucky going to be the prohibitive favorites, at least in the conference tournament. There, like if they came in at like 15-1 to win the conference tournament, is that live?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's entirely doable. I think that is a sound wager to make. I will give you my best long shot of all the high major conference tournament teams that are out there that could cut down the nets and be a bid stealer. It's Penn State in the Big Ten. The Big Ten, as usual, rough, tumble. Teams are battered. They're bruised right now. I mean, they just bludgeon each other to death practically in the conference season. But Penn State is a plus-size team. Got a kid in Lamar Stevens. They go out there, and it is a war. Every 40 minutes they step on the floor. And right now, Penn State's been one of those odd teams because they've been an analytics darling for much of the season, but through just sheer bad luck, despite being highly competitive in games, they couldn't close out. They started the Big Ten season 0-10, and here they are. They've won, I believe, 4 of their last 5 games. They've scored at least 1.09 points per possession in each of those contests. 2 of those games, both in Happy Valley. One was against Michigan, who they really flattened pretty much from start to finish. And then they went out and eviscerated Maryland. Maryland right now projected 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they just destroyed them. They were up by 1.39, I believe, or 29 points, something along that line in that game. I actually had the Lions at +1.5, so I felt pretty good about it. They ended up winning by like 18. But they seem to be putting it all together. They got a lot of experience. That is a team, and the last I saw, they were 30-1 to win the Big Ten conference tournament. And, if you get them at 50-1, I know what it is on DK right now, maybe 60, 70-1. I mean, that's worth a U.S. grant. I could conceivably see that happening based on how they've been finishing in games here down the home stretch.
Do they have any chance in the actual tournament? Because, I mean, if you're going to throw a grant down, you could win 200 grants if you bet them to win it all.
No, I mean, obviously they'd have to win the Big Ten automatic berth to get in to the overall NCAA tournament just because the record is, below 500. They stand right now at 12-16. Never in the history of the NCAA tournament has a team with 16 or more losses earned an at-large bid. Now, the Big Ten's playing a plethora of games this year. Let's just speak in hypotheticals. Let's say they do get the automatic berth. They end up cutting down the nets, and they sneak in the tournament. Probably going to be seeded, I would imagine, as a 12, maybe an 11 seed. If you could get odds on them reaching the Sweet 16, whatever that is, bet on it. If it's 5-1, 6-1, I think that is a reasonable wager. But for them to, carry that momentum for the Big Ten tournament, you think they'd be exhausted from that. And they got a quick turnaround. They have only a couple of days off because the Big Ten tournament been pushed back. So they're the very last. The Big Ten Conference Tournament Championship is the very last game on Selection Sunday. I think the turnaround, I think they would just be too tired to, pull together another stirring run in the NCAA tournament. But again, stranger things have happened. But right now, I'm just focused on Penn State, hopefully scoring me some cold hard cash and winning the Big Ten tournament overall.
Yeah, I mean, even just betting them individually game per game as an underdog, you're still gonna get plus money that way. But you kind of hit on it. Like if you get exhausted from these conference tournaments, and like we all remember UConn. And that's always the vivid example that sticks out with, like you even brought it up, like with Kemba Walker, you run through the ACC tournament, you end up winning the national championship, boom, that's the new thing. Oh, someone gets hot during the conference tournament, and that team's going to become unstoppable when the actual tournament starts. But year after year, does it really make a difference to you what teams actually do in the conference tournament? Like if Duke gets bounced round 1, is that going to be like, oh, watch out for Duke, like they're terrible now?
No, I mean it's all about positioning for seeding, but that all goes out the window, out the door as soon as the pairings come out on Selection Sunday. It doesn't matter how you finished in the conference tournament in any way, shape, or form, unless you are trying to build up a case in the selection committee's eyes to earn an at-large. If you're one of those, classic bubble teams, but Jim Boeheim has famously said for years that he hates the conference tournaments. He thinks it's a worthless exercise. Now, Jim Boeheim has been living in Bubbleville for the last several years. And I think Syracuse right now doesn't have to, sweat out Selection Sunday, no matter what it does here down the stretch and what it does in the ACC tournament. But there are some coaches that share that same sentiment where they would rather rest their players because February can be a bit of a drag. It can bog teams down. Kids are just tired. They're physically beaten in many cases. They just want to heal up and then try to, reinvigorate themselves for hopefully a hot, stirring run in the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, I mean, that's why we call this March Madness. It really begins with the conference tournaments, and this is why it's really unpredictable and there's so much upheaval and upsets because, let's be honest, some of the kids out there, they're kind of half-assing it.
So let's circle back to the Big Ten just for a second, because we didn't really touch on Michigan or Michigan State, two very national teams, very public teams, especially Michigan State as it pertains to the tournament. Like, oh, yeah, got to bet on Izzo. He's going to go to the Final Four once every 3 years or so. So they're up at the top. Purdue is up in the Big Ten as well. You mentioned Penn State as a potential sleeper. Who do you actually like to win that?
Well, in terms of the Big Ten tournament overall, or just the Big Ten in general, it's one of the hotter conference races out there. I think the Big 12 has probably got the most drama surrounding it with a number of teams that are still in the conversation to win the regular season title. And of course, with Kansas, and it's 14 straight years of Big 12 championships on the line, chasing Kansas State right now. Kansas really the New England Patriots of that league. But in the Big Ten, with Michigan State going into Ann Arbor last weekend and knocking off the Wolverines, I thought that was a statement game. They didn't have Nick Ward, their best post player. He's out until the NCAA tournament after undergoing hand surgery on his left hand. He had a hairline fracture. They've been battling through injuries. They've been battling through ineptitude. I think Michigan State is vulnerable. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they did not survive the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. Just because they've had some self-inflicted wounds through a high volume of turnovers, and with the limited depth that they have, they've sloughed offensively at times, as well as they played. You would think eventually all the mounted injuries are going to catch up to Tom Izzo, and the Sparty Party is going to get crashed. So I'm not convinced that Michigan State is going to be, spectacular in the NCAA tournament. Could it win the Big Ten tournament? Sure. Michigan could easily win the Big Ten tournament, though they've had these bizarre offensive outages, though, to be fair, they are a mirror image of, the last year's Michigan team that made it to the national title game, ended up losing to Villanova. I don't think they're as good based on the eye test, despite, the fair comparison, almost similar comparison in numbers speak. But I think if I'm going to wager on a team that has the best shot outside of those two to cut down nets, it's not Purdue. It's probably Maryland, because Maryland has all the talent in the world. They've got size of Bruno Fernando and Jalen Smith. They got strong guard play. They're just young. And as a result of that, they've been inconsistent, undulated in their performance. But they could get hot at the right time, and they definitely have the tools, the necessary tools, to again score that automatic berth. But regardless, they're going to be in it as an at-large.
Yeah, Maryland's 70-1 to win the tournament right now, so I'm guessing they'd probably be around 10-1, maybe like 8 to 10-1 to win the Big Ten tournament. Just because the two Michigan teams they're going to be the prohibitive favorites by the time that comes around. Are Houston and Cincinnati real teams that we have to take seriously, or is that just a small conference being like, yeah, they'll be okay?
No, Houston's the real deal, Holyfield, and a team that you should fear. And the reason I say this, they remind me a lot of Nevada. They play positionless basketball. They have a lot of length. They have a ton of athleticism. They can play at varied paces. So they can rock them and sock them with you in a half-court setting. They love to fly in transition as well. Because of that length, because of that athleticism, because of the experience. Remember, they nearly knocked off Michigan last year. If it wasn't for Jordan Poole draining a miracle three at the buzzer to put the Wolverines over the top, Houston would have marched on. Made it to probably Elite Eight, maybe even the Final Four. Now, they don't have Rob Gray from that team. He was the standout point guard that they had. But, Corey Davis is there. They've got some Marty Brooks is still there. They've got some scores, and they defend. They're top 15 in the country adjusted defensive efficiency. And they got some dude named Kelvin Sampson on the sidelines. He's got a ton of experience in the postseason. He was out of the college game for a while because, famously, we used to yell at him, in Illinois when he was in Indiana. We called him Kelvin Sanctions for the penalties that were accrued by him in terms of some of the recruiting wars, legal phone calls and things that were made. He was a consultant in the NBA. He might have been an assistant on a bench somewhere for a couple of years, but he's now back in a college game. And a guy, I remember, that took Oklahoma to the Final Four in 2002. So he's got that kind of experience, and he's kind of an old school, hard-nosed, tough-minded coach. And that kind of thinking is imprinted on the style of play by the Cougars. I like him a lot. I'll be curious to see where they land. I think they're going to be a tough draw for anybody. But because of their versatility, that is a team I would not be at all shocked winds up in Minneapolis.
So when we talk about the ACC, you hit on North Carolina a little bit. We talked about Duke. Is Virginia just kind of pencil them in every single year now, and they're just going to do what they do, and if they can score some points, they're going to be fine?
Well, yeah, everybody's going to reflect on recency bias, and that's from last year, right? The fact that they lost as a 1 seed, the first one ever, to a 16 seed in UNBC and those Mighty Retrievers. I don't think the underdog is going to bark twice. I think this Virginia team, people are going to undervalue it. They're going to underrate it. They're going to be like, it's the same old story. Virginia just dominates an ACC play. Then they go out there and fall on their sword in the NCAA tournament. This is a different team. And the key here is this. Remember last year, DeAndre Hunter, who was the 6th man of the year in the ACC, broke his wrist the Monday before that UNBC game. It shell-shocked Virginia as a result of it. I think psychologically, clearly, visually, we saw it. They just were not the same. DeAndre Hunter is a pro, and he's going to be a very good pro. He's long, he's athletic. He can knock down threes with a 40% plus consistency. They got Ty Jerome there as a prolific scorer. Kyle Guy is an excellent scorer as well. They've got size there and Salt and Huff, a couple of big bodies in the paint. They're arguably one of the best defensive teams in the country, number 2 in adjusted defensive efficiency, but they have more offensive firepower than previous iterations of Virginia that we've seen. So to underestimate them, to write them off for last year is totally unfair. I think it's unwarranted, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Virginia won the whole thing. I like Gonzaga a little bit more, but they have the necessary ingredients in the sauce to win the national title.
Well, Virginia, UNC, and Duke are all top 5 in the country as we speak at the moment. You also have Virginia Tech and Florida State ranked. Beyond Virginia Tech and Florida State, is there anyone else in the ACC that you can see either making noise in the conference tournament or sneaking in and doing a bit of damage in the first few rounds of the tournament?
Not really. I thought Louisville was that team a while back, but they have just fallen asleep at the wheel offensively. They have scored 0.95 points per possession or less in 5 consecutive games. They have fallen off the continental shelf and into a deep, dark abyss in terms of putting ball in a basket. So that's a concern. Syracuse is always a threat because of the zone. That's a team that's so hard to prepare for in a quick turnaround that they could win multiple games in the NCAA tournament. But again, in the ACC tournament, you don't touch him because of Boeheim's philosophy. He doesn't give 2 craps, like I said, about the ACC tournament as a whole. I think Florida State's interesting. They were an Elite 8 team last year. They've got size. Kabengele at 6'10" is a guy that can beat you inside and out. Kamaji, who's 7'4", has become more coordinated. He's got a nice little touch around the basket. That's the thing you got to worry about with some of these tall guys. Like, I don't know if you've seen Central Florida. They got this cat named Taco Fall. Again, that's his name. That's not like Ron Mexico, like his road name. Taco Fall. That's his real name. Dude's 7'6". 7'6", you might say, oh, he's clumsy. There's no way. He's got 2 left feet. He's coordinated. He runs the floor relatively well. And he just had I think it was like a 24-20 game recently against SMU. and UCF, one of my last 4 teams in the current projected bracket big board field. So, but getting back to the ACC, Virginia Tech's got, a lot of upside. If it gets Justin Robinson back in time, their starting point guard who's been dealing with a foot injury. But it's really, outside the big 3, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke, I'm not real keen on any of these teams making a deep run, not only in the ACC tournament, but also the national NCAA tournament as well.
Well, how about from the Big 12? You hit on Kansas. They just win it every single year, but they're not currently winning it right now. Kansas State's there, Texas Tech's there. Beyond the Big 12, do any of those 3 teams have national championship upside?
Look, I love Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech is worth a wager. What's Tech on your board right now in terms of odds?
Tech is 28-1. So they're a part of that Nevada, Kansas. It's Nevada, Kansas, and Texas Tech all at 28-1. The next tier below.
And again, another smart wager at 28-1. You lay $20 on it, let it ride. What I love about Texas Tech, they are the Virginia of the West, and I say that because in terms of adjusted defensive efficiency, there is nobody better than them in the country. They've only allowed 0.85 points per possession, which is absurd. And when they are firing at all cylinders offensively, and they've really shown that side to their game here the last, 5-6 contests, they're nearly unbeatable. I mean, they steamrolled Kansas in Lubbock last weekend. Jared Culver's an NBA player. He's a local product there in the panhandle of Texas, a guy that certainly can get, the job done. But Moretti has really stepped it up from outside. They've got some scores. And you match that with that defense, they're never out of a game. And, they crash the boards well. They match up well with just about everybody. That's a team I really like a lot. I think they're probably going to wind up as a 3 seed. I mentioned LSU as being potentially this year's Michigan. I think Texas Tech is very much in that conversation as well. But that race, over the last 2 or 3 games of the regular season is going to be something because you got, not only Texas Tech and Kansas State right now tied for the conference lead, Kansas in that 14-year streak on the line. Baylor's right there, tied with Kansas at 10-5 in the conference. And if hits the fan, Iowa State's waiting in the wings. So, and Iowa State's an interesting team because the athletes that they have, though they've been rather inconsistent, unsteady here down the stretch. But man, I do love that Texas Tech team. The guns are definitely pointing up.
In the Big East, only Marquette is ranked inside the top 25 right now. Obviously, Nova is still lingering around. Like, they're going to get into the tournament, right, at 28 or 21-8?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Are they like a real team this year?
No, and definitely do not fall in love with the brand name. I think this is a very vulnerable team. What Jay Wright has done, based on the exodus of talent that he lost from last year's national championship team, is remarkable. I mean, they started off, I think, something like 10-0 in the Big East, and now they've kind of fallen back to the mean, regressed to the mean. They are 2-3 dependent, and they are too dependent on 2 players in particular, and the veterans in Phillip Booth and Eric Pascal. And when those guys are off or in foul trouble or get dinged up, they're just so susceptible to an upset. It's not even funny. Now, they just beat Marquette at home to stay in the conversation for the regular season title. They only trail the Eagles by a full game. But they just don't have the horses, and defensively, they're rancid. I mean, they are number 80 or 81, I believe, in adjusted defensive efficiency. So I could see Villanova landing probably on the 6th line come Selection Sunday, and I think they're going to lose to an 11 seed, especially if they don't match up well other than they have. That 11 seed does a formidable front court, say like a Taco Fall in Central Florida. I do love me some Marquette, though. I think Marquette, alongside LSU and Texas Tech, in that who's the next Michigan conversation, because they have the best scorer in college basketball, Marcus Howard. Everybody talks up Zion this, Zion that. They're all hot and bothered about it. They're all panting heavily when his name is mentioned. But Marcus Howard is such a joy to watch. He is like a Reggie Miller type, just a pure scorer. He dropped 50 in a game earlier this season. He's dropped 40 in a game multiple times. I mean, he's going to go out there without batting an eye and probably put up 30, 35. He could be Steph Curry to Marquette like Steph Curry was to Davidson. Now, obviously, Davidson was from the SoCon and a small conference, and the Big East much bigger, much more formidable. But Marquette is also more than Marcus Howard. They've got the Hauser brothers, who are versatile and exceptional. They've got Morrow inside. And as much as we talk them up offensively, they're actually better defensively. They're the number 1 team in the Big East in adjusted defensive efficiency. I love Marquette. They have very few weaknesses, and because of Howard shouldering the load for this team and could just have a magical run in March. He's somebody like I play in a Top Gun tourney challenge, we call it, with a bunch of Yahoos, and it's a singular player fantasy draft. So it operates just like a postseason NFL fantasy draft where, you're picking guys based on teams you think are going to go really far. If I have the number one pick, I'm taking Marcus Howard, because if he gets hot, even if they, lost in the Elite Eight, he's going to put up enough points that I'm probably going to win that league. So that's how exciting Marquette is. And I'm really excited to see where they land and what kind of damage they inflict in the NCAA tournament.
So beyond Marquette and Nova, is there anyone else that from the Big East that could do anything, like even make the tournament at this point?
Well, St. John's is going to make it, and they have one of the better scorers in the country as well, and Shamori Pons.
That's also a good name. You need to come up with your all-name all-stars.
Nothing beats Taco Fall, though, man.
I don't know. Would you say Shamari Pon?
Shamori Pons.
That's great. Is it with a Z?
No, with an S, on Golden Pond.
No, so
yeah.
He needs to get his name illegally changed. Change that S to a Z. He's going to the NBA. He could be the new Travis. He could be the new Travis Outlaw, who I'm convinced only got an $80 million contract because his last name is Outlaw.
Yeah, and he cut off Shamori, just call him Sham Pons.
It's great.
I mean, the T-shirt logos are endless. The possibilities there for that, but they're going to make the tournament. That Chris Mullen is their head coach. Now, he's not really a coach. He's Chris Mullen. He's a figurehead on the bench. He has one of his assistants do all the X's and O's if you watch a game. But he's freaking Chris Mullen, one of the greatest players in NBA history and a legend in New York basketball in that scene. He's done a really good job recruiting, naturally, as you would expect Chris Mullen to do so. That's a team that's going to make the tournament, but, man, they're so Jekyll and Hyde. I would not trust them. They just lost to Xavier at home. Seton Hall is one of those fringe teams that could make it. Xavier's trying to make a hard charge right now. If they get hot, they can build up the resume. They may be able to sneak in, backdoor their way into the tournament. Same with Georgetown, coached by another iconic NBA player in Patrick Ewing. So as it stands today, it's probably a 4-bid league, maybe as many as 5, but I don't really see anybody else sneaking into the overall field.
All right, let's go out west. Why is the Pac-12 so bad?
That's a question many of us in the college basketball community have been grappling with all year. It's hard to put your finger on it. The talent that has come in there, it's still solid. It's not, in terms of pure talent, it's not a terrible league. It's just one that's consistently underperformed outside. I think the talent level isn't as good as the ACC. It's the style of play doesn't match up well in the Big Ten. The SEC, the style of play doesn't match up well, and the talent level not nearly as high. It's just a very mediocre vanilla conference this year. Now, Washington, up until I pissed away a few binges on them last night, I thought had a legitimate shot at making the Sweet 16. Part of me, the sicko inside of me that refuses to let go, this is why I continuously draft Josh Gordon in fantasy football leagues every year, still believes that Washington's probably going to survive to the second weekend. They lost to Cal last night. Cal is the worst high major team I've ever seen. Like, Mayo, you and I got a shot. We get we get like 3 overweight dads on our squad. You and I play in the backcourt. We got a shot against Cal, and Washington lost to them inexplicably. So, they play zone. Thibault, I think, is the best on-ball defender in the country. Some people would argue it's Trey Jones of Duke. He's very much in that conversation, but they have the athletes. They play a Syracuse zone, which is, again, difficult to prepare for. When they have their bleep together, this is a team that clearly can win multiple games in the NCAA tournament, but based on the performance I saw last night against Cal, I don't know what to believe anymore. But the Pac-12 sucks. It's Washington. Arizona State's probably going to get in. They should be better under Bobby Hurley than they really are. They've lost some just unexplainable games. Outside of that, the rest of the conference, it's regurgitated Taco Bell.
So it's going to be like previous years. I think it was last year where it was just like take the under on tournament wins for the Pac-12 and it's free money.
Well, not necessarily. We've been there before with the Pac-12 a handful of years ago where they only had 2 teams in. It was like Colorado and Washington, I believe. And I think Washington was the highest seeded team as like an 8 or a 9. And then Colorado was like a 10 or 11. And they both made it, if I remember correctly, to the Sweet 16. So as much as we've been raking this league over the coals, it would probably defy our expectations. And they'll be like, see, told you, suckers. We were better than advertised.
So you have Gonzaga, you have Houston, Nevada of the smaller conference schools. Is there any like lingering sleeper that's out there?
Yes, Wofford. Believe in the Terriers of Wofford.
Where the fuck is Wofford?
Spartanburg, South Carolina.
All right.
I don't know what the redeeming quality of Spartanburg, South Carolina is outside of Wofford University, but this is a legitimate, dangerous team. If you're looking for this year's Loyola Chicago, they have the best shot. This is a team that within the new net ranking system is a top 20 club. And even if they were to get bounced early in the SoCon tournament, like SoCon is better than the Pac-12 this year. That's with Furman and East Tennessee State and UNC Greensboro and Wofford. I mean, that league is better top to bottom with the Pac-12 and the crap that it's cranking out night in and night out. But Wofford, they can shoot, man. Mayo, they shoot over 40% from distance. And unlike a lot of these mid-major teams that, yeah, they have the occasional 7-footer or 6'11 guy that's uncoordinated, that's a klutz, that's clumsy. They have guys that are like 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", 6'11 that are legitimate athletes. They can hang. The first game of the year that they played, and credit to Roy Williams for playing a true road game against a mid-major, it was North Carolina. And they were right there to the bitter end against them. They also played Oklahoma, lost to them on the road, but tightly contested game. They got blown out at Kansas. And then they lost another tight contest at Mississippi State, which is another tournament team. So they are battle tested, and they haven't lost since that game against Mississippi State. And that was way back in mid-December. They are that good. They are that legit. And if they're a 9 or 10 seed and you're a number 2 seed, maybe even the number 1 in that region, do not underestimate the Terriers. They're going to earn their sausages.
It just seems like one of those things. If they're shooting 40% from outside, that they're going to be one of these tournament teams that could definitely beat the 2 team if they get hot. But in any game, they could lose by 30 points when they go cold.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're precisely right there. But the one redeeming quality, again, is that Wofford has is they have that front court presence. And they can bang with some of the big boys that are out there. But I don't think they're going to have an ice cold night from outside. They haven't all year. I mean, I'm looking at the number right now. 41.5% from 3 this season. It's crazy.
Finally, before we get out of here, we got to talk a little bit of how the ramifications of the NBA go into this. You mentioned the 3 guys from Duke. They're all going to be lottery picks. Who are the other like top end guys you think right now will project inside the top 5 or top 10?
Well, you know how the NBA is. It is a league that constantly chases upside. I call it the Stromile Swift syndrome. You remember Stromile, right?
As a fan of the once Vancouver Grizzlies, I vividly remember Stromile Swift. He won a dunk contest.
Yeah, he did. And that's about the only thing that he did in his NBA career. And, he was a top pick, and a lot of people they get seduced by what they perceive as length and athleticism. Anthony Bennett, who was one of the more colossal failures out of UNLV. Oh, he's 6'8". Oh, he can dribble the ball. Oh, we got to take him. There are a lot of those players that exist that are young and underdeveloped. So I can't necessarily speak to some of those players. I can only focus on the players that I think are productive, that I think could transfer nicely, maybe a more aged, a fine wine, if you will, of a player, kind of like in the Buddy Hield mode. Because remember, Buddy Hield played all 4 years in college, and people dinged him for that. And now I think he's Sacramento's leading scorer, if I'm not mistaken. So Dedrick Lawson at Kansas is one player that really stands out to me. He's one of the more efficient guys. He's got a great face-up game. He's fascinating at 6'9". I think he could be, probably a top 15 overall pick. You got to definitely watch out for him. I mentioned, Brandon Clark earlier from Gonzaga. Carson Edwards at Purdue, though he's in a massive slump right now. A point guard that's got a lot of bounce in his step, can jump out of the gym, pretty good defender. He could get hot and really raise his draft stock. If Murray State gets in, and they're going to have to win their conference tournament in the Ohio Valley to do so, Ja Morant is a freak. This is a guy that had 0 stars. Nobody even know who the hell he was. and was stumbled across by an assistant coach from Murray State who was scouting another team. And the story goes, he was watching the A group and he was hungry. So he left the gym that the A group was playing in on some AAU circuit, and he went to another gym that had a popcorn stand. And the B group is there, and he buys a bag of popcorn, and he's standing there eating it. And he's like, who the hell is this kid? Why is he with the B group and not the A group? And, started researching him a little bit more, scouted him a couple of times. Nobody else knew about him, offered him like within days. That was Ja Morant. And Ja Morant right now is probably going to be a top 5 overall NBA pick. He's the nation's assist leader, and he has freakish athleticism. Like his dunks, everybody talks about Zion's dunks. Ja Morant's are equally, if not more, spectacular. So you should YouTube him. And then I'm going to throw out another small school guy who I think could stick on a roster for a long time in the NBA, is Mike Daum of South Dakota State, fighting Jackrabbits. If they get in, he's one of the all-time leading scorers in NCAA history. He's like top 20 now, over 3,000 points in his career. He's 6'10", 6'11", and he is deadly from outside. He's got a good post-up game, great face-up game. As you and I know in the NBA, if you are that tall, it can knock down mid-range jump shots with regularity. You're going to collect a check probably for a decade. So those are some interesting names to keep an eye on, assuming, of course, some of the small school guys make it into the postseason.
Brad Evans at Yahoo Noise on the Twitter machines. You got all these videos coming out. What can we expect from some content from you during bracketology season?
Yeah, Fantasy Flames and Lames that I write for fantasy football season, I apply that same kind of thinking to the bracket. So my bracket Flames and Lames will be posted, one on the night of Selection Sunday, and another one following on Monday. I will probably have 1,000 words of hyperbole on Gonzaga and why I'm picking them to win the national title as a separate piece from those other two at some point. And what I'm really excited about this year, I have convinced Yahoo Brass that we need to talk about gambling more because I'm a degenerate and I love it so much. And we are right now formulating an idea that I came up with and kind of massaging it on how to introduce sports wagering to our audience. And I think there could be a live stream of me in a couch-like environment with a bunch of toys and snacks and hopefully alcoholic beverages, watching me react to the games in real time from a wagering perspective. And we're going to have some additional preview shows on everyday slate of that day's sessions action from a sports wagering exclusive perspective. So I'm really super geeked and excited to introduce that content to our audience.
I am now super pumped for this. Now it'll actually give me some insight instead of me just picking teams by jersey color.
It's hashtag fade the noise. So
well, I mean, I should have done that. I actually jumped on with your first half Washington -6 last night.
Right.
Thanks. I'm going to be one of those people. I am now going to become one of the people on Twitter like, the fuck do you know, Brad? I hate you.
All I say is hashtag fade the noise. If you do the opposite of what I tell you to do, chances are you're going to score that vacation to Hawaii you've always wanted.
See, that's what I always tell people with my football picks. Just do the opposite of me. And you're going to be banking. And people think because I have the show, I know what I'm talking about. That's not true. I'm just highly excitable, and it makes me watchable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we're giddy about this kind of stuff. We're going to back it up with facts and numbers and all kinds of data. But when you know too much, typically what happens is the opposite becomes true. It's just, a fact of life.
Yeah, I can see that. So you can follow me at the PME, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. If you want to get into a draw for $20 DK, 2 ways to do it. Smash the like for the video. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section and tell me which long shot team beyond 25-1 you think is live for the NCAA tournament this season. Or leave an audio review, 5 stars, preferably. If you leave me 4 stars, guess what? You're not going to win. So I hate to tell you that. But you can leave your DraftKings handle and something nice about the show. I'll announce the winners on Monday. Golf show, Bay Hill with Jeff Feinberg. So you're going to want to tune into that to see if you won or just check your account to see if you have an extra $20. Both ways work. I prefer you tune in. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!